provide you with the lowest per GB rates, night or day. SLT 4G, driving you ever forward.
Making headlines at first at 9, out of the blue. President Maithripala Sirisena dissolves parliament and moves for a snap election on the 5th of January. Tug of war. Government justifies the dissolution of parliament while the former regime's faithful say otherwise.
We will show them that what this president is trying to do is unconstitutional.
No clear winner. Even the civil society and the legal community are at odds.
We really urge the government to look at this in a constitutional way.
I see nothing unconstitutional where His Excellency President goes back to the people and asks them, well, you
give your mandate. Former Defence Secretary calls on the public to give PM Mahinda Rajapaksa a 2/3 majority in Parliament. Inferno. Monster firestorm in California claims 9 lives. Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammin Keknaika. Now, before we move on to our lead stories, President Maithripala Sirisena today visited the temple of the sacred tooth relic in Kandy and engaged in religious observances.
President Maithripala Sirisena, who arrived in Kandy this morning, visited the temple of the sacred tooth relic and paid homage. The head of state was welcomed by the Diyavadana Nilame of the temple, Pradeep Nilangadala. Ministers Mahinda Amaraveera and S.B. Dissanayaka, as well as Chief Minister of the Central Province, Sarath Ekanayaka, accompanied the President.
Staying with the head of state, President Maithripala Sirisena dissolved the country's parliament last night and declared a snap election on the 5th of January next year. The President's proclamation dissolving the parliament came into effect last midnight.
A Gazette notification was issued by the Department of Government Printing last night, stating the proclamation of the head of state pertaining to the dissolution of Parliament. Accordingly, the Gazette stated that as per paragraph 5 of Article 70 of the Constitution to be read with paragraph 2c of Article 33 and paragraph 2 of Article 62 of the Constitution, and in pursuance of the provisions of Section 10 of the Parliamentary Election Act No. 1 of 1981, allows the President to dissolve Parliament with effect from midnight and summon the new Parliament to meet on the 17th of January next year. The President also ordered that election of the members of Parliament be held on the 5th January next year. Meanwhile, the period beginning from the 19th of November and ending at 12 noon on the 26th of November this year has been specified as the nomination period, during which nomination papers will be received by returning officers. Following the issuance of the Gazette notification, former UPFA MP LAKSHMAN arrived at the government press last night, where he expressed the following views.
The people are looking forward to an election. They have been given the power and therefore let them decide. No one can oppose this. Can the Supreme Court hold elections when it is the people who are asking for it? We will have no issue. If the matter is taken before Supreme Court, it will take a few days for a decision to be given. We will have no problem. It will be baffling to know if holding elections is unconstitutional. Cabinet of Ministers will remain to function, while all other deputy and state ministerial positions will cease to exist.
Following the issuance of the Gazette notification, people celebrated. Meanwhile, Chairman of the Election Commission Mahinda DESHAPRIYA says that they are prepared to hold elections whenever it is called.
No comments.
ජනාධිපතිතුමා පාලන විසුර හැරියා. ඒ විසුර දිනයකුත් දැන් තීරණය කළා තියෙනවා මැතිවරණ සම්බන්ධයෙන්. ඒතකොට ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔබතුමාලා මැතිවරණයකට සූදානම්ද?
අපි ඕනම වෙලාවක මැතිවරණයකට.
Since the Election Commission is always prepared to hold an election, we won't be faced with any issues. The Commission will hold elections in accordance with law.
ඒ ආකාරයෙන්ම සිදු වෙයි.
ලංකාවේ මහා මැතිවරණ කොපමණ මුදලක් වගේ වැය වෙනවා.
කෝටි 4
About 4 to 5 billion rupees. It is not much these days.
අද බැලුවම
ජනවාරි පහ ඡන්දක ගැසට් එක නිකුත් කරන්න කලින් ජනාධිපතිතුමා බොහෝ කවුරු හරි ඔබගෙන් උපදෙස් ලබා ගන්න දේ පිළිබඳව
කිසි උපදෙසක් ලබා ගැනීමක් නැහැ.
No advice was given on dissolving the parliament since this is the commission. According to the constitution, it is the election commission's duty to ensure that a conducive environment is created to hold elections.
ඡන්ද විසීම ඇති කරලා දෙන එක.
ඒ කියන්නේ මේ නියමිත දිනයට තියෙනවා.
ඒවා
We cannot comment on this matter because in a world where there is uncertainty, we cannot say things will happen accordingly.
කිසිම දෙයක් ස්ථිරයි කියන්න බෑ.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, the United National Party insists that President Maithripala Sirisena's decision to dissolve the parliament and call for the general election will be challenged in court. Meanwhile, addressing a media briefing at Temple Trees today, former parliamentarian Harsha De Silva was adamant that the president's actions are both undemocratic and unconstitutional.
Mr. Sirisena is attempting to remove the word democratic from the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. He's trying to scratch it off. And we are going to show him that the people of this country are not standing with him on this. We have a vast array of folks with different political views coming together to fight Sirisena and Rajapaksa. We will build a broad coalition, and that broad coalition will defeat this undemocratic, illegal, unconstitutional action of Mr. Sirisena. That has been already agreed upon. We will take our matter to the judiciary. We will show them that what this president is trying to do is unconstitutional. We believe that we will get the right verdict, and thereafter we are not worried about any election. We are always ready for any election. But the election must be fought legally, the right way, within the constitution. So therefore, let us show a majority in parliament. Once we show the majority in parliament, then there will be a legal government. And that legal government will be ready to face any election.
We will fight it in the courts, we will fight it in parliament, and we are also ready to fight even in the polls. We are not afraid of Maithripala's whims and fancies, as he has shown in the last few days.
We were of the stance that it wasn't necessary to seek the assistance of court because it was to be decided in parliament. We are ready to change with the times. We are a party ready to do so if the public requests change. We did not have such a discussion. I should say that Mahinda Rajapaksa never violated the constitution in this manner. That we have to check with the court's verdict. We have more time. According to sources, the chairman of the Election Commission has agreed to hold an election. He has arrived at the decision as a person without discussing it with the Election Commission. With a tug-of-war happening over the legitimacy of the dissolution of Parliament along with other recent political changes in the country, members of the legal community and civil organisations moved to give their interpretations on the President's actions. Executive Director of PAFROL, Rohan Hettiarachchi, insists on obtaining the verdict of the Supreme Court. In contrast, convener of the organisation Rata Surakimu, attorney at law Krishmal Varnasurya, is adamant that the dissolution of Parliament is very much constitutional.
Unfortunately, we have noticed the senior lawyers are standing with the political parties and they are giving their views, but it is completely, we have noted that it is biased towards the political parties. And also, the recent development, dissolvement of the parliament also is questionable. The lawyers is in two lines. Some of them are clearly stated that this is completely unconstitutional, and also some lawyers saying this is constitutional. We as a monitoring organization, we as a democratic practitioners, we urge the government, we urge the elections commissions to check the the Supreme Court verdict on this issue, because otherwise the legitimacy will be a questions. Legitimacy of the elections, the legitimacy of the elected members will be questions even after the elections. And also, as per we are consulting our lawyers at these days, and we are having our board meeting on coming Monday, and we also seeking what kind of legal intervention we can do as PAFREL. But we really urge the government and also the Elections Commission to look at this in a constitutional way and also get the legal opinion from the Supreme Court before they call for real elections.
And there is a very clear power there to His Excellency the President at Article 33 2C to summon, prorogue, dissolve Parliament. Then this conflicts, according to some people, with Article 71A of the 19th Amendment, where we specifically put a time limit. My interpretation of this is that should Parliament have gone in the manner expected by the law, in terms of this Constitution, had things flown and had the Constitution been followed, then I would say that 4.5-year qualification is applicable and His Excellency could not have dissolved for 4.5 years. But what happens if the Constitution itself is being violated by institutions of the government? So a constitutional power has been exercised by His Excellency, but it's not accepted by the previous Prime Minister. Then His Excellency appoints ministers. But the previous ministers say, no, we won't go, we are not going, we are still ministers. Then the legislature, the Honourable Speaker says, I am not going to accept the President's constitutional power, and then goes against the decision of His Excellency the President. Then what does the President, whom we have given our executive power, do in such a situation? His Excellency can rely on the power given at Article 33 2C, where there is an inability of His Excellency to ensure that the Constitution is respected and upheld. Why? Because in this Article 33 that we brought in the 19th Amendment, there is a clear duty, not even a power, a duty that we the citizens have given His Excellency. What does it say? It shall be the duty of the President to ensure that the Constitution is respected and upheld. If the institutions created by the Constitution are not following what the Constitution says that it should follow, then His Excellency has no choice but to seek recourse to Article 33C and go before whom? The people. Because why? It is the people who are sovereign. And I see nothing unconstitutional in this backdrop where His Excellency the President goes back to the people and asks them, well, you decide.
Cabinet ministers charged that a snap election had to be called in face of illegal conduct by former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and Speaker of Parliament Karu Jayasuriya. While rationalising the President's move to dissolve Parliament last night, Cabinet ministers also commented on their readiness to contest the upcoming general election. These views were expressed at a media briefing held at the Prime Minister's office this morning. The instability of the country was created by the Speaker and Ranil Wickremesinghe making a relevant statement against the Constitution. However, it paved way for people to exercise their franchise. As a responsible politician, if Wickremesinghe thinks that he was illegally and unconstitutionally removed from the post, he should have gone before the judiciary. Instead of doing that, he led the country towards conflict. Meanwhile, some Western embassies made it an issue of their own and began to poke their fingers into Sri Lanka's internal matters. The President realised that the issue cannot be resolved by 225 in Parliament, and he brought it before the country with an election. I saw the US ambassador in Sri Lanka saying in a tweet that holding an election is a serious matter. I can't understand him. That is the most democratic move, which allows the people to make their choice at a general election. As the head of the executive, the President appoints a Prime Minister according to the Constitution. Then the head of the legislature, the Speaker, says he can't accept the new Prime Minister and he will only accept the former Prime Minister. That statement pushed the country into a political crisis. His partial behaviour also destabilised the country. We have brought everyone to a common stage. We have a vision now. We have already made a manifesto. We have put ideas of each other together. As our policies are matching, leaders of the parties will soon decide the party and the symbol for the election. We will contest the election under the party and a symbol which the general public favour. I didn't see it. Anyway, there is no problem with it. Whatever the symbol or the party, on the 5th, victory will be ours.
Meanwhile, Minister Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa said that the President dissolved the Parliament according to the powers vested with him by the 19th Amendment to the Constitution.
The Article 33(2) of the 19th Amendment gave some extra powers to the President. No, he has not made an official statement so far. Their only duty is holding the election and releasing results. Leader of the JVP, Anurakumara Dissanayake, is also critical of the President's move to dissolve the Parliament. Addressing a media briefing in Colombo today, the leftist party leader said that the head of the state had no constitutional powers to dissolve Parliament and the party will take the matter before Supreme Court. The tradition of changing a government was an election. The alternative was changing the government within Parliament. The objective of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was to slash some executive powers which were infringing on powers of Parliament. We brought provisions to the Constitution via the 19th Amendment to minimise the President's interference in Parliament. The President yesterday used some powers which were not given to him by the Constitution. The dissolution of Parliament is unconstitutional. Now there are two issues before us. The Parliament has been dissolved illegally and now we are asked to go for an election to form a new Parliament. Then, is that Parliament valid? A number of experts in law say that the Parliament was not legally dissolved and it still exists. They also say that the President doesn't have power to dissolve the Parliament. That should be resolved in Supreme Court. He dissolved the Parliament yesterday because he didn't have the parliamentary majority. If he doesn't get the majority in the election on the January 5th next year, he might dissolve the Parliament again. The JVP hope to go before the Supreme Court against the dissolution as well as to get a clear definition on the relevant provisions of the Constitution. Former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa urges the public to give Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa a two-thirds majority mandate in the looming general election. The former Defence Secretary made the plea while addressing a seminar held in Kaluthara today, where he also criticised the involvement of foreign envoys in the country's internal affairs. At a time when the country was facing a crisis owing to the conflict of opinions and policies of the President and the then Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa agreed to become the Prime Minister upon the invitation of the head of state. But Mahinda Rajapaksa was of the view that we must go before the people by holding an election. When the former Prime Minister is leading the country into a greater crisis by having discussions with ambassadors, and when the Speaker is not ready to accept the interim government, the only solution is to take the matter to the people. You have the chance to appoint Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister of a stable government with a two-thirds majority. You also have the chance to elect members who stood with him to Parliament. Now the dissolution of Parliament, which came into effect last midnight with the proclamation of the head of state, was made after all positions in the cabinet were filled. Accordingly, functions of relevant ministries will fall with newly appointed ministers until such time general elections are held.
Going into yesterday, 22 cabinet ministers had taken oath under the interim government, with the rest being sworn in yesterday before the dissolution of Parliament. According to the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, the number of ministers in the cabinet is limited to 30 in a scenario when a national government is not in effect. Among the newly appointed ministers to the cabinet are the President and the Prime Minister, who hold the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Finance respectively. Vimal Veeravansa took oath as the Minister of Housing and Social Welfare before the President last morning. During a round of cabinet appointments in the evening, Udaya Gammanpilla took oath as the Minister of Buddha Sasana and Religious Affairs, while MLAM Hizbullah was sworn in as the Minister of City Planning and Water Supply. CB Ratnayaka was sworn in as the Minister of Postal and Telecommunication, while SM Chandrasena took oath as the Minister of Plantation Industries. Johnston Fernando was appointed the Minister of Trade and Consumer Affairs, Christian Religious Affairs and Cooperative Development. Gamini Lokuge meanwhile was given the portfolio of Labour, Foreign Employment and Petroleum Resources. Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardena was meanwhile appointed the Minister of Industry and Commerce. As referred to in Article 47 of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, the Cabinet of Ministers functioning immediately prior to the dissolution of Parliament shall not withstand such dissolution, continue to function and shall cease to function upon the conclusion of the general election. In the meantime, 71 parliamentarians have lost their right to a pension following the dissolution of the Parliament. For a parliamentarian to be eligible for a pension, an MP should hold the post for 5 consecutive years. Accordingly, 45 MPs of the UNP, 17 MPs of the UPFA, 8 parliamentarians of the Tamil National Alliance and an MP from the JVP lose their claim to a pension.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Sri Lanka's industrial production in September this year has fallen 0.7% from a year earlier, with declines in food manufacturing. The Department of Census and Statistics say the index of industrial production fell to 106.9 index points in September. An index value of 100 shows a growth in manufacturing compared to the base year of 2015. In September, food manufacturing, which accounts for just over a third of industrial production, fell 2.2% from a year earlier to 105.2 points. Apparel manufacturing, making up 19.8% of the industrial sector, grew 3.7% to 111.1 points. Other non-metallic mineral products, the third highest, grew 6.7% to 116.3 points. Meanwhile, rubber and plastic production, forming 5.7% of manufacturing, fell 8.8%. Textile manufacturing grew 14.6% to 126.6 points, while tobacco manufacturing fell 23%. The official China Daily said today that around $57.83 billion worth of deals have been agreed for the year ahead at the China International Import Expo. The expo, which commenced on the 5th, bringing thousands of foreign companies together with Chinese buyers in a bid to demonstrate the importing potential of the world's second biggest economy, concluded today. Deals for intelligence and high-end equipment were set to total at $16.46 billion, while those for consumer electronics and home appliances were around $4.33 billion. Sales agreed for the automobile sector goods hit almost $12 billion, while clothing and consumer goods inked $3.37 billion and food and agricultural products made $12.68 billion. In addition, $5.76 billion worth of medical devices and medical care goods were sold at the expo. The trade expo is designed to demonstrate goodwill amid mounting friction with the United States and other countries. On Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping promised to lower tariffs, broaden market access and import more from overseas. Time for news from overseas. Now, a monster firestorm in California has claimed the lives of 9 people. Thousands of residents packed to the Pacific Coast Highway to head south or took refuge on beaches. Among those forced to flee the fire were celebrities Lady Gaga and Kim Kardashian, whose homes in Malibu are also affected.
A raging wildfire in Southern California has swept into the beach resort of Malibu, which is home to many Hollywood stars, leaving buildings burning and sending residents fleeing. Further north, another huge wildfire destroyed the town of Paradise, leaving 9 people dead and 35 missing. In all, 3 major fires are burning across the state. Among the towns under evacuation orders is Thousand Oaks, where a gunman killed 12 people in a rampage on Wednesday. Authorities say the Camp Fire in the north and the Woolsey Fire and Hill Fire in the south are being fanned by strong winds. More than 250,000 people have been evacuated across the areas. The California Governor's Office said the magnitude of the destruction of the fire is unbelievable and heartbreaking. The blaze started on Thursday near Thousand Oaks, about 64 kilometers northwest of central Los Angeles. Another blaze, the Hill Fire, started at about the same time, also near Thousand Oaks. Yesterday, the flames jumped Highway 101 and headed into coastal areas. The fire now covers an area of about 35,000 acres. Town officials released a statement saying the fire is now burning out of control and heading into populated areas of Malibu. Malibu and nearby Calabasas are home to many celebrities, and some have been posting on social media.
Moving on to other international stories, President Donald Trump has lambasted Florida's election recounting process, calling it an attempt by Democrats to win a U.S. Senate seat with fake votes. Trump told reporters that others Well, there's a lot of dishonesty over contested votes in Broward County, despite there not being any evidence of voter fraud. The gap between the two candidates, Republican Rick Scott and Democrat Bill Nelson, narrowed to 0.2% as of yesterday as Broward County votes were counted.
Florida's beta races for the U.S. Senate and governor appeared headed to recounts yesterday as Republican leads narrowed and President Donald Trump vowed to send in lawyers in a development reminiscent of the state's dramatic 2000 presidential recount. In his lead dwindled in Florida's Senate race, Republican Governor Rick Scott filed lawsuits late on Thursday against Democratic election supervisors in two countries, accusing them of violating election law and demanding access to records of their vote tallies. Incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Bill Nelson's campaign also filed a motion in federal court asking that provisional and absentee ballots not be rejected because election officials deem that the signatures do not match voters' signatures already on file. The accusations and lawsuits in the political battleground of Florida conjured memories of the state's 2000 presidential recount when the winner of the White House hung in the balance for weeks before the U.S. Supreme Court stopped the count and Republican George W. Bush triumphed over Democrat Al Gore.
Now, Austria says that one of its colonels are being investigated on suspicion of spying for Russia. The recently retired 70-year-old suspect is said to have been spying since the 1990s up until this year. Austrian Foreign Minister has cancelled her plans in December to visit Russia over the scandal.
Until now, Austria has been seen as one of only a few allies of Russia in the EU. But that may change as Austria said yesterday that a senior military officer of theirs is believed to have spied for Moscow for decades, adding to a list of recent Russian espionage cases and soaring relations with arguably the country's closest ally in the EU. Foreign Minister Karin Knizl, who danced with Russian President Vladimir Putin at her wedding in August, has cancelled a planned trip to Moscow over the case. She has also summoned the Russian charge d'affaires since the ambassador is outside the country. Speaking to reporters, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia had in turn summoned the Austrian ambassador. Lavrov added that he was unpleasantly surprised by the news about a retired Austrian colonel suspected of spying for Moscow, before going on to say that in accordance with international rules of communication, it is necessary to request explanation directly.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.
The latest fantastic-based film, The Crimes of Grindelwald, has earned mixed reviews from critics as it has a number of 3-star reviews with suggestions that the plot is overburdened with details and preparing for future adventures. There is praise for the vibrantly drawn characters and Jude Law is highlighted for his performance as young Dumbledore. Kitty O'Neill, the American stunt woman and racer known as the Wonder Woman, has died at the age of 72. In 1976, she became the first woman to join top agency Stunts Unlimited. However, her most notable stunt work was for the Wonder Woman series starring Linda Carter that aired on ABC and CBS from 1975 to 1979. Tom Hiddleston will be reprising his role as the God of Mischief in a new Marvel TV series based on Loki. However, no one knows where in Marvel's timeline this new series will fit into, given the character's fate in Avengers Infinity War. The show will be released on Disney's brand new streaming service Disney+. British actor Idris Elba was named the sexiest man alive last Monday by People magazine, becoming only the third non-white man to win the annual honour. The 46-year-old, who fans want to be the next person to play James Bond, is one of Britain's best-known stars and won a Golden Globe for his lead role in BBC television detective series Luther.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. And before we go, we'd like to take you to Lake Kauma, the Jewel of Flims, a municipality in Switzerland. It is surrounded by forests on 3 sides and contains a wooded island in the center of the lake, which is turquoise in color. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.